Oh, cool. Yeah, it's funny. I was looking for you on like to tag everybody.
Who's making the coffee?
Travis can have it now. Sure.
Trevor, I guess as a coach and a competitor, I mean, how excited were you for this challenge, right? I mean, the riddle that's never been solved, the guy that nobody's going to figure out. How fun is that for you to get in and say, we're going to craft a game plan to do this?
I mean, that's the ultimate. It gets me up, and those are the type of challenges I want for my athletes, you know, at the right time. And yeah, this is my purpose as a coach and as a person is to externalize the internal champion, and I feel that's what I do very well. So I'm very excited for that.
When you're making a game plan for a guy like Khabib, you know, like you've seen a lot of tape on him, right? I mean, I think people can figure out this is, I think, what it takes. But then how do you take that game plan and craft it? I mean, do you ever go, okay, I think this is what it would take to beat him, but I'm not sure my guy can execute that. I know he can do this instead. You know what I'm saying? Like, how much do you tailor a game plan against the opponent based on what your guy can do?
Well, first off, I tailor my game plans throughout a career for a championship fight. You know, we work on fundamentals from the beginning. And one thing that I think we were able to do very well was keep our most important weapon hidden. And with Justin Gaethje, he's a extremely good wrestler, and he's got a very unique style in wrestling. And he hasn't had to use it. Again, it's very hard to go and game plan against someone's wrestling when they haven't showed it. And I always call wrestling the get out of jail card in the fight sport, because wrestling, I believe, is the most dominant position controlling piece you can have. So I feel good about that. But Khabib is the best at what he does. So it's not like I'm going, hey, we're going to go in there and just out wrestle him. It's just, again, that's just a little bonus of what we have. And again, it's just an opportunity to go out there and face the best. And I do believe Khabib, I believe he's the best pound for pound. And I've thought that for a long period of time. I mean, there's other fighters that put on exciting fights, and you can consider them best pound for pounds and who they faced and things like that. But he's just it's patterns. It's who's the most consistent. And when it comes to being consistent, that's the key to being great. It's consistency, and Khabib is that.
So in the build-up to this fight, like, Justin's been pretty open. And I don't think it's a mystery. And I'm sure you guys have, you know, levels and multiple options. But he's like, I got to stay off the fence if I'm in the center. I'm in a bad spot. I mean, I think that's probably fairly common knowledge. But does it bother you at all or worry you at all? Like, oh, Justin, don't talk about any of that. Like, don't say anything in the public.
No, not at all. I mean, this is they're both so high level. They know what each other are going to do. You know, hiding a game plan. I think coming up with game plans, that's a great thing you need to do, and we definitely come up with game plans. But in life, you come up with plans, but your plan never stays exactly how you put it. You have to have a target. You have to have a destination, and you have to be able to adjust to your plan. If you take a trip and you hit a detour, a lot of people go, oh man, Oh, plan B, plan B. And that, to me, is the worst thing you can say to someone in a corner is, oh, man, we got to switch our game plan. I mean, instantly, you're clearly showing a big old sign to your athlete, we are losing, you know. And for me, it's the adjustments that we need to make. And I plant seeds. I don't put a lot of our opponents' names into my athletes' minds because we're visual. And if I say Khabib over and over and over, he's sleeping with Khabib through training. Every night he goes to sleep, he's got that visual of Khabib. Again, we focus on winning rounds. And, I mean, that's what Justin does. Justin's a performer. One thing I do know, he's going to go out and perform. And that's all I ask. I don't go into these fights so determined to win. And a lot of people always talk about, hey, man, you got to win, you got to win. And to me, you can lose rounds and still win the fight. And you can lose fights and still win championships. So it's about how do you adjust? How do you learn from things? People are like, well, you know, Khabib's, what if he takes you down? I said, that's one of the best things that can happen to us in a fight because we'll see things. You don't know how he takes you down until he takes you down. So what we're going to do is go out there and not hesitate.
So last thing for me, I would say, especially given what you're just talking about, given the respect you have for Khabib, what's the biggest key? Is it physical tactics or is it mental focus? Because I feel like when you watch Khabib fights, you see moments where guys break. You see it on their face and they go, man, this dude's a little bit different. So is it physical tactics and strategy or is it mental focus during the 25 minutes?
It's 100% mental, this fight. These guys are at the highest level. It's who can go out there and do what they do. You have to be in control of yourself to win championships, and Khabib has been the best at that. He has controlled himself throughout fights. He's had conversations with guys when he fights them. And to me, he's in control. What we got to do is take him out of control. And we're not going to sit there and force him to go out of control. We need to be in control of ourselves and not break. Khabib breaks people. And Justin Gaethje is one of those guys that, you know, he says the most craziest things. I've coached for a long period of time, and I've never had athletes say things in the way he says them. It's just like it's real. He really loves to fight. He really says, hey, man, if I die, I want to die in here. Like, that's crazy to me. And just to be real with that is honesty and truth to yourself and your self-image is key in life. And I know he's going to perform, and I know I'll be proud. And again, the outcome, I don't look into that. I look at going out there and making sure I'm on point. It's as important he needs to perform as it is for me to perform. You know, I am not here to go out there and hope he does well. I'm focused on me performing, and that's all I can control. And I trust that he's going to perform just because of his patterns.
Trevor, it would seem in a Khabib fight the worst case scenario would be you get to sort of round 3 and he's been dominant for 10 minutes. He's had you against the fence or on the floor for 10 minutes. Do you have an idea in mind? I know you said you don't want to go, oh, we need to switch to game plan B. But do you have an idea in mind what you can say or what you can tactically change to stop the fight getting that momentum for Khabib?
Yeah, there's so many different scenarios that go through my head with this, and different things that I've experienced in my career and things that I've failed at in my career that I've learned from. And it all comes down to the situation and the adjustments that we'll need to make. And I don't know if that's to be a coach and not just a teacher, but a coach, I have to know my athlete, and I got to know how to piss him off. I got to know how to wake him up. I got to know how to cool him down and slow him down and bring him back. That's where I have to perform. And I don't know in the scenario. I've seen it over and over in my head. What Khabib does, he goes out there and breaks people. And again, I don't know what conversation, what story I'll have to bring up if we get in that situation, but I'm ready for that. And I do believe Justin is the most coachable athlete in sports. The guy is unreal, how he listens and how he can turn a friendship off and listen to anything I tell him to do. Sometimes I mess around with him, and I always talk about being coachable. I have a story, a funny story. When Shane used to work out, Shane Carwin, he'd work out with all our classmates at the gym, and he was the only athlete that did that, and he was fighting on a large scale. And I have a hula hoop drill where it's hip control, and I call it hula hoop just to kind of, bring their ego back a little bit, mess with them, like the little dog barking. And I brought in a pink hula hoop and had Shade put it on, and Shade was so coachable. And Justin, if I told him to put a hula hoop on, he would put it on and swing it around and have no care. He's so freaking coachable. By far the most coachable person I've worked with, on the sense of, I almost wish he would ask more questions. He has 100% trust in me.
Khabib's fights all tend to look the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But is there one you can point at and say, from a tactical point, I've gained the most out of watching this fight? If it be Poirier, Conor, Tebow, is there one in his catalogue that you've looked at and thought, okay, I've seen something in this I can take away? Which fight would that be?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ones. Al Quinta taking a fight on when he had 4 fights. I was on that card with Rose and Joanna. There's 4 fights that fell through that week. And I remember them changing all the posters, and I felt so bad for the UFC crew just adjusting these posters. I'm like, gosh, there's so much work that goes into this. And he was adjusting, game plans in his head, I'm guessing, and going, oh my God, this guy. And he went out and wrestled, and Khabib made an adjustment and went to a jab and started looking, I'm going to say Muhammad Ali just because it didn't look like Muhammad Ali, but from Khabib going from wrestling to that, I was like, damn, he went to Muhammad Ali. He was on his feet. He was backing up and throwing jabs. So, I mean, there's so many different patterns in what he does so well. He's very good at adjusting, and he's greatness. He's a guy who is going to be the toughest to break, toughest to make adjustments to, and with the little adjustments he's made, he's been consistent. So I've seen all sorts. I've seen him get rocked. And stay so composed while he's rocked. He knows how to move his feet when he's rocked and pull you in and get you to pressure him so he can close the gap easy. I mean, there's so many different things. There's so many different fights. I see a little bit different in each fight he fights.
The last thing for me, a lot of the conversation about this fight has been, will Justin break? And I feel like no one's ever sort of been able to test Khabib's mentality. If Khabib can't take you down, is there a possibility he breaks? If he gets rocked and he's unable to get it to the ground, is there a chance that he starts to break?
Yep. I believe anybody in the world is breakable. And again, it's 90% of the time not. I mean, the athlete you're facing is a big part of breaking you, but your biggest opponent is yourself and the conversation that's going on in your head. And when you lose fights, most of the time you lose to yourself. And when you can look at an athlete and athletes that are truthful with themselves, they can be like, I could have did this, I could have did that. But the flags in your head where you're like, you start to pull back, you start to hesitate, you start to think, when's the round over? Those type of thoughts where you're thinking, past or future. You're not present. And, again, anybody's breakable.
Trevor, we've spoken with Justin over the years, and there were points where he would say, I care more about fighting Khabib than for the belt, because I would assume he was in agreement that he believes Khabib is the best fighter in the world. So how far back can you remember of Justin, kind of targeting this Khabib before you even got the
For a while, he did a little weight cut with him, and Justin was in the World Series. And after he helped him out, he's like, I want to fight that guy. Not out of disrespect, but he's like, he's that freaking good. And Justin loves to step up competition. He likes to get scared. He's a guy that I always have to pull back when we go out and do things, because he just loves fear. He loves things that scare him. It just gets him up. And he's one of those guys that I think he's been looking at Khabib for a long period of time. He wants to fight the best all the time.
And how would you compare the build-up, I guess, in preparation, not outside the pandemic, to when Rose fought Joanna? Joanna was undefeated. Everyone thought she was the greatest female fighter of all time. How would you compare the two, the builds for these two fights? I
think very similar outside of the trash talk. I think it'd be easier if Khabib trash talked. I really do, depending on who it is. But that makes you want to get up and fight more. I mean, I think the best athletes out there don't show anything, where they're not going to give you signs. I think Khabib's smart enough to go, hey, is Justin talking about his game plan because he's going to change it up on me? It's again, this is chess. And am I being played is what's going on through these athletes' head. I think that's the cool part about these high-level fights. Was Rose scared in the Joanna fight going in there when she was being bullied and being talked down and having that aggressiveness of Joanna? Oh yeah, she was scared. But one thing is a fear will produce tunnel vision. George St. Pierre used to be like, never again, never sign a contract. He feared fighting, but he would run to the cage. I mean, that's something special. So, I mean, fear is one of those things that turns you on and gets you fired up. That's why a lot of people fight differently than they spar, because there's that true fear. There's realness to it. And, Justin, says he's willing to die in there. And I think he's truthful with himself, that saying, hey, if I didn't have a coach that would be willing to stop the fight, he would go and tell. And he had said something that was super funny. He said, I don't think someone would kill me. He goes, I think I'd kill myself. I pushed my heart rate to that point. And I just laughed at that. It's just super unique. But yes, those two fights are similar in that sense, but so much different.
Khabib himself has said, obviously wrestling is his thing, but how much do you pay attention to his striking, considering?
His striking is wonderful. A lot of people don't understand his striking, and when he was talking about a Mayweather fight, does he go out there and outbox Mayweather? No, I think Conor does better in a boxing match than Khabib. But when you add wrestling to it, his striking's great. His feints and his level changes and his offbeat and things is super unique. So I think his striking is, you have to have it all at this level. He's definitely great in one area, but I think he's really, really, really good in every other area.
Coach, are you the kind to give an inspirational speech before Justin goes out there?
I go off feeling 100%. It's always present. I don't plan that. I go through scenarios in my head where, I have to challenge myself, and I'm just going through experiences where I failed and go, man, I've got to be prepared for that. Instances of forgetting mouthpieces in corners and just stupid stuff. I failed so much as a coach. I go off the energy in the room and what I'm feeling, and I feel like if I'm present, again, game plans are seed. I call them seeds that are planted. I've got to plant seeds, and I've got to be able to connect to that seed at the time when it's needed. And I don't go in there saying, I'm going to have this talk and I'm going to bring up this story. Not at all. I have to go off the whim, and I've got to be able to make an adjustment in the moment. But that's just an obsession of scenarios and experience, I would say.
Saturday morning when you meet up with Justin, what's the schedule going to be like? What's the fight day process for something like this to make sure he is in the zone when he makes that walk?
I would say a whole bunch of dumb dad jokes. I carry a weird environment. I try to make it fun, and my goal is to keep him not focused on the fight until we're in there, especially when it's last 3 days of fight week, because that's where their pupils start to open. They start to get really turned on, and I've got to pull that back and keep that catered. So I do a lot of stupid jokes, and I call it the light in Men in Black, when they zap them and it's like, what just happened? Anytime I see them start to overthink something, it's like I got to bring them back and I dumbify them. Maybe you could say it that way, where I make them go, what was I just freaking thinking,
We've got a minute. What's your go-to dad joke?
Let's think of one real quick. Why is everybody in, what would I say? I got to pull one that I made up. So if you're in Europe and you're sitting on a bench, I'm making this one off the whim. If you're in Europe and you're sitting on a bench, what are you?
I don't know.
European sitting down. That's dumb. See, that's off the whim. You got to come up with stuff that I see like three of you shake their head. And Nate Marquardt was the best. He squinted his eyes to go. He felt bad for me. I don't claim to be funny at all. Not at all. I make people dumber.
Trevor, just lastly.
Yes.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the redesign or your redesign of the mixed martial arts glove?
Yep.
What makes it so different to the UFC glove, for example?
So the UFC glove is a great glove. It's the first glove that really came out that's the same pattern. It's the Wano glove outside of the skirt is gone. The skirt was a piece on the inside that Shane Carwin, we actually had to cut into in Las Vegas when we were fighting Gonzaga. They had a 4X glove, and we had to cut into it. And I was just blown away that the commission allowed us to use scissors to get his hand in the glove. And then Don House ended up creating another strap. But to me, I call it a gardening glove. It's got, you know, finger holes that your hand goes through, and it causes your hand to be in this position. I mean, it works. It's been functional for a long period of time, but this sport has evolved so much, and I'm always rethinking things. And being injured as a coach is why I started what I'm doing. And I've seen all the issues with finger pokes and mainly hands being hurt. And when you can't make a true fist, it's how you hurt your hands. And I look at performance like people pay money to watch fights. And when you're paying big money to watch a fight, it's about, hey, if I pay $60 for a pay-per-view and someone breaks their hand and doesn't know it, that pulls the performance back. If my hands are worn down from gripping and squeezing, I always say when you watch a guy's fight, it's either their hands are here or they're squeezed all the way and they're white-knuckled. I produce a glove that's more in a position like this. If you look at like boxing hand wraps, they force your hand in this position where even if I hit here, my strong bones are lined up instead of in a position here where I'm hitting with my door knocking knuckles. And the straps are internal. And I talked to the UFC for 2 years, and they were interested. Dana was really, really interested. But coming into a deal, I want to be with the UFC first, mainly Dana first, because I think he's the creator of MMA and brought MMA into what it was. So it's a respect for Dana. And I'd like to get a deal done with Dana, but it's the strapping system and technology goes with all my equipment. I'm not ready to give up my company. I want to help all mixed martial arts, but I would love to start with Dana. And I think we'll get to some. I actually have a couple prototypes that I redesigned a new technology that's outside of my technology. So hopefully I'll get some time with him, and I know he's busy. But my focus right now is Justin Gaethje, and my goal is to help every athlete out there that goes out there and inspires the world. I mean, fighting right now is I think helping so many people deal with COVID and what's going on. And life is a fight. And once you fight, you realize that when you stop fighting, it's still a fight for all of us. So we're all fighters, and fighters inspire us. So I want to help all fighters, and hopefully I can help not stop finger pokes, maybe help a little bit. Yep.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to hear it. That's gonna be out the door.
Hi guys. How about this? How about this? Huh? Woo! How's everyone?
It's not pay-per-view expression.
Ha! That's right. A little media scrum. Took me 9 years to get one of these, you know?
Well, John, kind of knowing now what we know about your first visit here based on the documentary, what was your temperature coming in this time? I mean, were there any nerves, were there any thoughts going through your head about, what's going to happen this time around?
Well, when I came here for UFC 253 in September, knowing that these tests, for whatever reason, didn't agree with my body, yeah, I think there was a little trepidation and a little anxiety.
it was very interesting to see the way it all played out on Declassified and to see sort of some of the reenactments and dramatization. But some of those moments were very real. And if you know our live production structure and the way these shows get put together, you know we voice a lot of stuff in advance. The preparation starts weeks before the pay-per-view. So I'm not trying to put out the rest of the broadcast team. It's a big deal if our lead play-by-play guy is not available for a pay-per-view and a show of that magnitude. So it was less than ideal. I've never heard my boss, Craig Borsari, so excited when he called me and told me my next test was negative, and I turned around a couple more negatives, and here we are, and so far so good this week. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some emotions that come back when they're sticking that thing down my throat, for sure.
So I know the big concern was obviously your own health, and then obviously you mentioned not being able to see your kids and that sort of thing.
Right.
But as a professional, how much of it was just like, oh no, they're not taking this fight away from me?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you want to work the big shows, and I'm coming up on 9 years with the company this month and almost 50 straight pay-per-views. So, yeah, you want to work the big shows. I mean, that's really what it's all about. But I cut my teeth, as you know, with you, boots on the ground across Brazil for years and years, learning, you know, the secondary fighters and the bottom half of this roster, for lack of a better way to put it. So I think it was really just thinking about John Gooden and my backup at the time and all that was going to be put on his plate. I mean, dude, I'm literally in my room typing John Gooden's name in my fucking scripts. Like, literally, hi, I'm John Gooden. Welcome to UFC, whatever it was. So it was real for a while. But, yeah, I was thankful to be able to call a fight and a card of that magnitude. And I think the thing that was really sticking with me was, man, I'm going up to the 5th floor for a 14-day mandatory medical quarantine, and then I got to somehow turn around some negative tests to get home to my kids. So it was anxiety filled for sure, but you know, I think these things harden you and really just make you mentally tougher. I could use all the mental toughness I could get, John.
Sorry, so let's talk about this one. Another big fight. Obviously, everything's about the main event. I mean, it's a good card, but everything's about the main event. I know you're into the stories of these things as much as anybody. So what's most enticing you about this? Is it this, you know, this guy in Khabib who's like going towards this incredible record that nobody's ever had before, or is it this guy in Justin Gaethje who seems like perhaps just the right amount of crazy and the right amount of skill to get this done? Which one is kind of speaking to you more?
Gosh, that's a tough question, right? I am born and raised in the United States of America, so when Gaethje starts screaming USA, I would be lying if I said those moments don't give me chills, but I think it would be disingenuous for me to sit up here and not tell you that this is very much about Khabib Nurmagomedov, and the backdrop of his father is a really powerful thing. And, you know, he is not irritated with repetitive questioning necessarily, but in our fighter meeting yesterday, a little bit, skosh, but in our fighter meeting yesterday, I wanted to figure out a creative way to sort of attack that father angle in a sensitive, respectful way. And so I asked him if he had ever had any conversations with his father about Justin Gaethje as a possible future opponent. And Abdulmanap and Khabib would always look at the landscape of the lightweight division, and there would either be guys that they would earmark for Islam Makhachev to fight or guys that they would earmark for Khabib to fight. So Gaethje was on their radar, but more often than not as an opponent for Islam Makhachev. But I will say about Justin Gaethje, if you had to pick one fighter in this lightweight division who is best equipped to beat Khabib, to like save a dog's life, I think most of you would pick Justin Gaethje with respect to Tony Ferguson and the rest. You know, maybe Tony's a little more content hanging out off of bottom. I think in terms of the defensive wrestling, even though he hasn't had an opportunity to showcase it greatly, I think he is the guy best equipped to escape from underneath this, you know, lightweight / light heavyweight. The big question is, does Khabib feel like a light heavyweight to Gaethje like he did to Poirier? And I think we'll get those questions probably pretty quickly on Saturday.
Last one for me, and I know you like to break down fights and that sort of thing. So I want to ask you about the environment itself, too, because like we saw against Dustin Poirier that it felt like he kind of broke, right? But you remember that venue. It was full of people that were all very much cheering, you know, for Khabib. It was also hot as hell in there, you know what I mean? So it was like, It felt like a real pressure cooker. You know, inside the Apex, it's almost cold. There's no fans, or inside, I should say, Flash Forum. It's almost, you know, it's cold. So is this a better environment, I wonder, for Justin Gaethje? Do you think that's a factor at all in this fight?
I think to dismiss any of this stuff as a factor is pretty ignorant, right? You're absolutely right. This is the coldest broadcast environment I've ever called fights in. So for us, it's a dream. We feel like there's a hockey rink below us. But there have been some fighters who have absolutely excelled in this climate and others who have not. Imagine being Dominic Cruz. You haven't competed in 4 years, and you're walking out to an arena, and you can literally hear a pin drop. There's nothing ideal about that. So I do think that the crowd lifts up certain fighters fighters, and that whole backdrop resonates with some fighters and not with others. Look at the way Jan Blachowicz was able to compete in this type of setting. You know, he's sort of the crowning example for me of a guy who really sort of maximized this opportunity despite all of the different variables that we're dealing with. So I think that people are maybe leaning too much into how great Gaethje was against Ferguson just because he could hear every word out of Trevor's mouth. But I think these are the two best lightweights in the world, and I don't expect that the crowd or lack thereof to be a big factor Saturday.
Going off that, obviously everyone wants to see the fans back in the world get back to normal, but do you think there's something to be said that maybe we should at least appreciate this period in time with no fans? Because it doesn't take away from the sport, in my opinion, but it does add a different aspect to it. Do you think maybe we should actually enjoy the fact that for a while we're seeing high-level fights with silence?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think we all in general in life should probably be leaning more into the positive than the negative. I get asked oftentimes about not having a crowd as an announcer, and certainly when I go back and watch film and I hear some of these championship calls without that accompanying crowd response, it does sound a little bit anticlimactic. Certainly from a play-by-play man standpoint, when we got the cans on in a tunnel, we're not worried about any of that. And no one will be happier than me when the crowd is back, because I do feed off of it, especially when I'm doing that pay-per-view open, the whole Dateline Abu Dhabi bit. It's really nice to have the crowd behind me, although it's hard to compete with sometimes. But yeah, I do think that there is something very intoxicating about this whole atmosphere in Abu Dhabi, this W Hotel, walking into a largely empty arena to call sporting events of this magnitude. It's very weird. It's very intoxicating. And I do think that we should lean probably more into the appreciation than complaining about the lack of fans.
Is it remarkable then, without fans, that certain fights can still have that big fight feel? You know, when you see Masvidal and Usman standing there, you see Izzy and Costa standing there, and I can't imagine anything other than when you see Khabib and Gaethje standing there, you still get the butterflies, right? It's not that the crowd's there, it's the electric in the air, it's the two fighters themselves. Is there something to be said that this sport is so magnetizing, regardless of the presentation?
Absolutely. I think for American sports fans who are so aligned with their NFL teams, or European fans with soccer, football, whatever it is, you know, when your team is about to play a big game, you are anxious, right? You do not have a great appetite necessarily. Maybe you're drinking, right? But you do not want to eat a bunch of food when your team is about to be in a big game. And for me, when these athletes are set to compete, I'm not nervous as a broadcaster. It's not performance anxiety. It's the UFC fan in me that is thinking, holy piss, this fight's about to happen. Like, one of these guys is about to win and one of these guys is about to lose. So I've said it on broadcast a million times. I should probably change up the language, but there is nothing as tense as the start of a UFC title fight in a UFC main event. And I don't think if there were 20 people in the building versus 200, as we'll have here on Saturday, that would change for me.
The last thing for me, it feels a little bit like Khabib and Gaethje is coming at a moment in time. You know, there's no crowds, it's the end of the fight, and all that stuff. Just as a personal fan, like you just said, what does this fight mean to you? And what does it mean right now within the way the world is and the pandemic and all that? Sure.
Well, it's amazing to think how much we have done in terms of cranking these fights out. You know, I think back to April when I was wrapping my head around going to Lemoore, California to call fights in a climate that didn't seem all that safe, and had some anxiety at that time. And now I look, man, we've been ripping shows every single weekend and largely not missing a beat. You know, it's easy for me as a guy who gets his cut check by the company to sit up here and wax poetic about the executives and all the great things that they have done. But there's a lot of play-by-play guys that aren't working. And if they are, they're calling sporting events from their living room. So I'm very thankful to still be working, to still have my boots on the ground. And as far as the magnitude of this main event, you know, Khabib's legacy is essentially, a lot of it's rooted in being undefeated. And as such, he puts it on the line every time he competes. And that is tremendous pressure. If any athlete is mentally tough enough to rise above it, it is him. He's been largely immune to pressure, but I do think that this matchup, it'll either bring out the best in him or he'll finally meet his match. And thankfully, we'll find out in about 48 hours. Thank you.
Jon, I want to ask you a bit about your career. It is not easy to follow a beloved and iconic duo like Rogan and Goldberg. But over the years, I think there's no question you are the go-to play-by-play announcer for the big events. Can you just talk about having that evolution and, you know, just growing into the role of being the number one guy in the broadcast?
Well, thanks, and I appreciate you saying that. I'll try to answer this as honestly and as efficiently as I can. You know, I spent 6 years at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut. I never would have left there if I didn't think I could eventually ascend to being the number one guy for the UFC. That was my goal when I joined the company in 2011. You know, I didn't pull Goldie aside and tell him that was my goal, but I thought that I could eventually ascend and either work with Joe Rogan or be a part of the A team. And maybe it happened a little bit quicker than I expected it to. But, you know, I've always sort of leaned into the preparation, and sometimes you get frustrated when people always talk about how hard you work. It's like, yeah, oh, Anik, he just works hard. It's like, well, am I any fucking good, or do I just work hard? And so at times I got sick of everybody saying, oh, he just works hard, you know? And so finally, when I got elevated, said, all right, well, maybe there is some skill there that's allowing me to take this next step. But again, you know, Joe Rogan is an icon, and to sit to his left for these shows is not lost on me. I have a weird clause in my contract whereby they can terminate me without cause at any time. So when I tell you that I got to earn that seat every show, not unlike a fighter, that's the truth. And I treat it that way. You know, I got to go earn that seat for UFC 255 next month. And that approach hasn't failed me yet. A lot of people think the way I handwrite my fighter cards is antiquated. That hasn't failed me yet. But I'm really trying to, as much as I don't want to always keep my mouth shut, keep my head down, and, you know, just focus on the magnitude of these shows, because honestly, this is nothing like calling a college football game. You know, these shows are just such beasts. Every time we do them, the amount of hours of prep, 7.5 hours on a headset. And I think if I don't have my head in the proper place, there are plenty of guys who want to come take my job, hundreds of them. So we'll see if they can do it.
Was there a particular point or just instance where you kind of turned that corner? Obviously, you know, you're on the broadcast, you're calling the fights for the smaller shows, and was there just one that was like, you know what, I've reached that point, I'm ready for them to bump me up at this point?
I don't know if there was a specific fight. Certainly a year into my UFC tenure, I got a call to do UFC 155 in December of 2012 on short notice. So I think I got a call on Christmas Eve to go over to the audio guy's house and revoice the whole show. And so I think that kind of being thrown to the wolves helped me when eventually I ascended to pay-per-view, because I had done one. But I just think the volume of shows, you know, from the minute they hired me, I was doing half the shows. I was actually doing more shows, you know, than any play-by-play guy from the moment I got hired. So those repetitions were hugely helpful. When I go back and listen to some of my early calls, bro, I mean, I cringe, you know. I think my voice was a full octave higher at that point. I've had a lot of voice damage over the years from video games and other things. But I don't know that there was any specific moment, but certainly my confidence has grown, and I wasn't nearly as confident. You know, when I did Bellator Season 1 in 2009, I remember walking to the arena like, dude, they got the wrong guy, man. Like, I'm a stick and ball guy. What am I doing here? But thankfully, repetitions and age, you know, give you the confidence to do the job you're entrusted with.
Final one for me. I know you were also a broadcast teacher, if I'm not mistaken, before UFC and
right.
Everything took off. You know, now you have students who are saying, I want to end up sitting next to Anik on the show. What's your advice to those young broadcasters coming up now?
I do appreciate that. And I think my foremost passion is probably teaching, or I guess probably gambling, but a close second to gambling would be teaching. There's so many little bits of advice, but the number one thing I always say, and it may sound trite, but you have to be ready at all times. So translation, if you're listening to this, start a podcast tomorrow, start a blog tomorrow, because you don't know when your opportunity is going to come. And if you're not ready, it's not going to happen. I remember going to ESPN Radio in Bristol, Connecticut in 2005 for an interview. And all of a sudden I had to do an audition, and the schmo knows this, live on the radio, right? Literally, they send me in to do a national sports radio update at 4:20 p.m. Eastern. And if you're not ready, like, that ain't happening. So I didn't think I was ready, but you go bang out a 75-second update and you're ready enough and you get the job and you move on. So that was the biggest learning lesson for me, singularly in my broadcast career. Thank God I was ready enough to do a national sports update that day, because if I wasn't, I never would have broken that ESPN door down, and I certainly wouldn't be here talking to you guys.
Speaking of gambling, you said Gaethje has the best tools to be the one to get to erase the O from Khabib. He's a plus 270, I think, at MGM. Khabib minus 340. Do you agree with those?
I think the fight is properly priced. You know, when somebody says Justin Gaethje is a live underdog at plus 270, what they are telling you is that it's improperly priced in some way, shape, or form, that he's a live underdog at that number and he should probably be closer to plus 180. If you look at the odds history of guys like Kamaru Usman and Khabib Nurmagomedov, Khabib hasn't always gotten that Kamaru type respect where he's minus 850 against these guys. But without having a blueprint for beating Khabib Nurmagomedov, which we don't have, I do believe it deserves to be entrenched at minus 340. I don't know how you can race to the window necessarily unless your bankroll's a lot fatter than mine to lay that price. But I do think at this point in time it's properly priced. And we did see when Khabib fought Dustin Poirier that Khabib closed an even bigger favorite than he opened. So I'm most interested to see if any Gaethje money comes in and if Justin, ends up lower than plus 270 or so.
And we've talked with DC a few times in this fight, and obviously he's not just teammates with Khabib, but like he considers one of his closest friends, and he compares it to when he calls draw and win matches.
Right.
If he loses, he needs a minute, and he lets you guys take over. Have you had that conversation with DC at all about like how this might play? Like, because Khabib might lose.
Yeah.
He might need that moment.
Yes, we talked about it yesterday, and obviously it's just me and DC in a two-man booth, so I will be there to rescue him in those moments. And I do think the Duran win comparison that he brings up is appropriate in some part, but you're also talking about Duran Win being 1 or 2 fights into his UFC career versus a title fight involving a guy who's trying to go to 29-0. So I do think that the emotions will be heightened for DC. Not that he's closer with Khabib than Duran necessarily, but just because of the magnitude of this fight. But this is something that we have all had to deal with, whether it's me calling Daniel's fights or Paul's fights or Dom's fights. And certainly for the teammates, it's a very tricky thing. But I know Dominic Cruz, when he's had to call Jeremy Stevens' fight, he is really able to separate church and state. He is really able to focus on the fight, be objective, and then, dry his tears if need be. But I know it's weighing a little bit heavily on Daniel. He has never called a Khabib fight before, as you guys know, and I'm always there. I mean, that's the thing. I'm not the professional athlete in this broadcast equation, right? So I'm the guy who's there to sort of make those guys shine, make those guys look. Okay. Cool. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for joining us.
That was a lot more people here than last time I did this.
All right, John, you have the first question?
Yeah.
Like, I guess it could be a simple question, or it could be we can sit here and talk about it all day. But Khabib and his wrestling. Wrestling is not a new martial art or something we haven't heard of. So why is his so much more effective and so much different than anybody else's we see?
It's just something he's been doing his whole life. He didn't come from freestyle Greco wrestling to mixed martial arts. He's just been kind of doing mixed martial arts his whole life. And just talking to a lot of different guys, not just guys he's competed against, but guys that he's trained with. He just brings a different type of pressure, a different kind of strength. He has really, really good hips. And, there's a lot of moving parts to it. It's just really interesting because usually it's like a guy with that good at wrestling. You can go back and you can watch let's watch him at the Junior World Championships or the Yargan or like all these different wrestling tournaments, but there's nothing. He's just an MMA fighter. So it's just different when you train wrestling. As you all know, wrestling starts in a low stance unless you're wrestling Greco, but it's like he started MMA wrestling. So I think that's what makes his style so unique, and he's good at he can shoot low level, he can fight in the clinch, pretty versatile in both offensive aspects of wrestling. He's just really good. And this fight's unreal. The more you break it down, and I'm getting into watching Gaethje's old wrestling matches, and I'm really starting to kind of, the wrestling is going to play a big part in this fight as it does in all of Khabib's fights. But this is just the first guy he's faced. This guy wrestled Division I in college. This is the first guy that he's fought that's been a Division I wrestler. He took Jordan Burroughs to a 7-4 decision. That's, for people that don't know who Jordan Burroughs is, that's the team captain for the United States wrestling. He's a phenomenal athlete. So it's gonna be really interesting.
So you touched on it a little bit there. So I mean, like anything can happen in a cage fight, right? That's why we love it, right? But if you were designing somebody to beat that style of Khabib, man, when you talk about the defensive wrestling that Justin Gaethje has, you add in the nasty leg kicks that he has, and you add in the power that he's got in his hands. I mean, is that kind of the blueprint if you were designing a guy that you say this is probably going to be problematic for Khabib?
I would say one of the best challenges you could put in front of Khabib. But there's a big part of me that still thinks stylistically Ferguson could be the guy. You know what I mean? It's just like Gaethje has the wrestling, and not only does he have the wrestling, but the guys that he's training with for his wrestling. His main partner is Ryan Deacon. He was #1 seeded guy at 157 pounds last wrestling season, won senior nationals, really good wrestler. But we all know Khabib's a different animal, but at least he's got good training partners. But I feel like length and a certain level of grappling is what's going to give Khabib a lot of problems. You know what I mean? So it's like I was going back and watching the Iaquinta fight tonight, and the way that Al was defending the single kind of limp leg in a way, it's like if he had the length to reach all the way around and grab his hip and spin his leg out and possibly take his back, which is something you could see Tony Ferguson doing. Both are interesting fights. I mean, these guys are the top of the heap. Justin Gaethje's as dangerous as they come, and I think he's going to push Khabib for sure.
The last thing for me, I mean, there's obviously more to it than this, but Gaethje's kind of said, like, I get it. Khabib puts you up against the fence, you're in trouble, but he doesn't take people out in the open mat, out in the center. Do you feel that way? I mean, is that a fair assessment? Is that what we need to look for right away? Is if it's against the cage, he's in trouble?
Dude, yeah, you got to control the space with Khabib, and you even watch Al on a day's notice. He was able to dictate some of that space, and we always say like stay inside the black line. You know what I mean? There's that one black line, the one that Mark Henry always talks about. There's the black line that goes around the octagon. You get a guy past the black line, you're getting him against the fence. You keep him within the black line, you're in the center. So, Al did a good job of it, and I would like to think that Gaethje could do the same thing. But I mean, once Khabib gets you going on your heels, it's like trying to stop a freight train. It's damn near impossible. So it's going to be really interesting. And one thing about Justin, when you break him down, especially when you watch the Tony Ferguson fight, he has subtle changes in his footwork to where, Khabib will dive on that leg and go low, whereas I feel like Justin could deflect that in the way that he'll throw a right hand and step through into southpaw, and he can kind of move his leg out of the way and maybe kind of bull and matador Khabib a little bit. We'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be a really fun fight, and what a way to cap off this last 3-week stretch. I mean, this has been unreal. It's been one of the best experiences of my career, and it all ends. The grand finale is one of the best lightweight fights we could potentially see in the history of the UFC. So it's going to be awesome.
Mike, were these two fighters fighters that you had prepared for at all back in your lightweight days?
It's funny you say that. When I first got in the UFC, I was at UFC 148, and I saw Khabib fight Gleison Tibau, and I was like, he's 19-0. I called Joe Silva, and I was like, hey, that's the guy I want to fight. Like, I just knew he was tough. He had a sick record. I'm like, I think I match up good with him. And as time's gone on, he's become the man we know today. I'm not saying I don't think I could beat him, but I had my eyes on him for a long time when I was at lightweight. It's like I always said, I think a guy to give Khabib problems is a guy that's got some length, the guy that can scramble, that can blend a little wrestling with some grappling. But there's a good chance he would have beaten me, but I like the challenge. You know what I mean? 155 was just not my weight class, as we all know. But hell of an athlete. He brings something cool to the table. Like Gaethje, I never really had my sights set on him. Just because as he came in the UFC, what kind of fights they're going to put him into. And as he's coming in, I was kind of on my way out at 155 pounds. And thank God, because let me tell you what, I got a long body and I got long legs, and he would butcher me. He's a tough guy, man. These guys are legit. But yeah, I put myself in that situation. And that actually, the fight with Khabib, it almost happened it almost happened twice. But in Tampa, when he lost his fight with Ferguson, when Ferguson went to the hospital, it was like a week's notice. They're like, hey, do you want to step in and fight Khabib? And I'm like, God dang it. Like, I've been training for a southpaw this whole camp against Beneil Dariush. I'm feeling like I was very ready for that fight, as I showed. So I was like, we thought about it, but I just thought it wouldn't have been the best decision. But it was always there.
And everyone talks about the U.S. versus Dagestan wrestling, that aspect. But what do you make of Khabib's striking? Because Trevor Wittman says it's great, it's unorthodox, same as Justin Gaethje. Khabib says he has a good jab. But as an analyst, when you look at his striking, what stands out?
Dude, it's so underrated. I mean, people you could hear in the commentary, like I said, I watched the Iaquinta fight again today, and they're like, you can hear Rogan kind of ripping on Khabib with his chin being up. But as time has gone on, that's just his style, and what that is that's not anything amateurish. That's just him knowing his space. That guy knows his range. He knows that he can slide his head back. If he knows he's about to get hit, he's not going to leave his chin up. He's going to drop levels and shoot. So that just shows he's really good at distance management. He's got a good jab. The overhand right has evolved, as you saw in the Conor fight. And, and Poirier is one of the better strikers at 155 pounds, arguably the best, you know what I mean? You would want to, there's a lot of good guys at 155, but he's definitely in the conversation for best strikers. And Khabib did a good job negating that. And he's a guy that's just ever evolving. You know what I mean? He's not the same guy he was when he fought Gleison Tibau at UFC 148. He's become a lot more polished. He's got a very educated jab. And I just think where he shines a lot as a striker is he's just very good with distance management. To be a really good grappler, you have to have a good concept of distance, because you can't just drop levels and shoot when the space isn't right or the timing isn't right. And, and Khabib's distance management is as good as they come. He knows when he can slide his chin back, and if he knows he's about to get hit, he's just going to drop levels and take you down. Kind of a dual threat. So, his striking's evolved. That jab's good. Apparently, he learned it from DC. That's what the rumor is. That's what the rumor is. He learned it from DC, but I think Javier Mendez might have had a big part of that.
Right. I've seen you training with a variety of different athletes on this trip, but I'm wondering which has been your most memorable and unique experience.
Oh, man. Without a doubt, Rogerio Nogueira. I mean, I'm such a fan of the sport, and sometimes it's hard to contain myself. Like Megan kind of yesterday was like, Mike, try not to fanboy too much. I'm like, I'm trying. It's hard not to. I've had such a tremendous appreciation for a lot of these guys I've seen since before I ever even started training, and as time has gone on, and they've come in the sport while I've been here as well. And that's just a guy that I grew up on. And there's guys like him. They kind of paved the path for us to be here where we are today. And I just have such a tremendous amount of respect for an athlete like that, and watching his career in Pride. And he's the only fighter to ever win a Pride belt and a UFC title. And he's just a legend. It's just like the guy has presence, and the fact that he just was like, hey, we're training today. I was like, oh my God, this is what it's all about. You know what I mean? When your time in the sun, when your time under the spotlight comes to an end, you're only left with one thing, and that's your relationships and your memories. You know what I mean? That's all you have left. And that'll be one of the best memories I've had in my whole career, was getting to train with a guy that I have looked up to and admired for so many years. It's one of the best. It's been like the highlight of this trip. So it's been that was a really cool experience for sure. Yeah.
What is it about Nogueira that you love so much?
What's there not to love about him? I mean, the guy's had legendary wars. The fights that he had with Fedor, his comeback win over Krokop, when he got pile drive by Bob Sapp, when he beat Tim Sylvia, when Tim Sylvia was still the man at heavyweight, and just the way he's persevered through his career. If you know his story before he ever even started competing, I mean, this is a guy that almost died, and he got mauled by a tractor, if that's the story correctly, and he went on to have one of the best heavyweight careers of all time. And, I think it's just crazy. The guy, there's the reason why he's still here working for the UFC, is because of all the things he's done for the sport. He's helped pave the way for a lot of us guys. And he's a man that in my opinion, he just deserves a tremendous amount of respect from every person he crosses paths with, because he's one of a kind. He's a very special human being. He's really nice, and he's really tough. He's really tough. It was a fun training session, but I definitely walked out of there a little banged up. He's still got it. He's definitely still got it, for sure.
Obviously, earlier during the pandemic, you gave thoughts about why you're not going to take a fight at this time. As the months have gone on, do you still feel the same, or do you think that we could get something on the books for you?
Oh, dude, I am chomping at the bit to compete. After being here, being around the energy, getting a chance to train with some of these guys. I still haven't had the chance to spar, but I mean, last night on floor 6, we had quite the training session, and dude, I want to compete, man. I love this opportunity I have now being an analyst, and it's something that I feel like I've taken advantage of this trip, and I've stapled my spot. I'm going to be one of the guys that's going to be behind the desk for the duration of my career. I feel like I've kind of cemented that. But I'm a fighter. That's what I do. You know what I mean? And seeing these guys compete, and I know a lot of the matchups that are going down at 170 pounds. I know what guys are available. I know what we're looking for right now. I was hoping to leave here with a matchup, but it doesn't matter. I'm hungry. I want to fight. I want to compete. I want to win a world title. And I mean, the stars are aligning. It's all about quality, not quantity. You know, I put my time in the sport. I've been here for 9 years. I've been in the top 10 for 5 years. Let's do it. I want to compete. So I think January is the right date for me. We'll see what happens, but I'll be ready when the time comes.
Was that matchup Hamza?
I can't tell you. There's no for sure matchup. We know what's available, you know. But everybody, especially after the face-off, everyone's like, "You're fighting Hamza." I'm like, that was just to tease you guys. That was just to throw a little gas on the fire. But he's a good kid.
Have you seen Kevin Lee's new tattoo?
Yeah. You know what? You'd be surprised, man. Like, I don't really have that many. Like, look, we had our feud. It's a very at this point, it's just a healthy competitive rivalry. We see each other at the PI. You know, we ask each other how we're doing, how's life. He'll even ask, you know, how's mom's doing? I'm like, mom's is good, you know, and we're fine. It's just a healthy competitive rivalry, because as much as we'll be nice to each other, in the next 30 seconds, we'll be like, hey, you know, someday I'm going to beat your ass. You know what I mean? So you need healthy rivalries in the sport, but not a fan of the tattoo, but whatever suits him, man. I'm sure he doesn't like my tattoos either. You know, it's whatever. It's all good. Different strokes for different folks, I guess.
You mentioned your face-off with Hamza. How did it all happen? You guys were in the same restaurant?
I was getting off the elevator, and I was riding the elevator down with his buddies, and then he was down there, and he's just like, he's such a matter-of-fact guy. Like, you know, I think maybe in the press conference with Gerald, he talked a little trash, because that's what press conferences are for. But I think there's just like, he's learning his English, so he's very matter-of-fact. So I'm like, hey, man, good to meet you. And he's like, good to meet you. And he throws his arm around. So when are we going to fight, brother? I'm like, man, he sounds like you're fighting Magny in December, Weidman in January. I mean, if you can squeeze me in sometime in the spring, man. Like, yeah. So he's just like super funny, super nice guy. And as confident as he is, he's definitely humble. You know what I mean? He's got that Khabib vibe to him. You know, he's confident, but he's humble. And he's a nice kid, man. Good, big things coming for that kid in the sport. But, yeah. Up and down the road, maybe #1 contender here as we both get some matches under our belts and see what happens. But yeah, good kid for sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Hi, everybody.
You got an Oscar. Oh, so
I Instantaneously, yeah.
So you come up here.
This good.
So weird. 1 minute.
I hope.
He didn't go in the second time. He was supposed to fight him.
I'd give Vinny my
It's when Wittman's like, it seems like Brooks and Rhodes and had to change all these fights.
Yeah, it was impressive. Just to make him feel comfortable.
Really?
Yeah, I thought about it.
That would have been brutal.
It was the second time. Moved to Wisconsin. I know. Probably.
People moving.
Audio wasn't as good as I wanted in terms of
That was a good stretch.
itself. That was the saving grace of that. Great match.
Thank you. Bizarre.
between. Doesn't even register. Tremendous what I get against a laugh, that right away. Tremendous what I get against a laugh. Before he even sat down.
So you gotta give a laugh. Like,
Right.
Hey guys. Oh, okay.
DC, obviously, man, you're a professional and you're gonna do things the right way. But with this one, man, with this being so close, was there any part of you that thought, I don't know that I need to be in the booth for this fight?
You know, I've always said no to calling my teammates fights. But as I move into the second phase of my life, you know, I have to. It's my job, and it wasn't like a decision made like on a whim. It was a lot of people asking, can Daniel do this job? And for me, I've called Islam Makhachev fights. I've called Deron Winn fights. And I feel like I stayed down the middle as best as I could. And so I figured I could do it. It's tough, right? Because Khabib's been there for 8 years now at AKA, and we've seen him rise from the very beginning. But I got a job to do, and that's what I'm going to do on Saturday. Right. Look, and here's another thing, right? Certain guys, if he fought, I couldn't do the job. I'm being honest. But I respect Justin so tremendously that I can do the job with him calling Justin, because I feel so, I like Justin so much. Yeah, it's hard to do it for someone that you know. To call Khabib and Conor with all the bad blood, I couldn't have done that, because you're so solely in your guy's corner. But Justin's a good guy.
Well, since you're praising him there, I mean, and obviously you're going to be fair about this. I mean, is he the toughest challenge of Khabib's career? Because it seems like the guy that just has all the right tools that could trouble Khabib.
I believe he's the toughest fight for Khabib, you know, and for a long time, you know, we thought that Tony Ferguson was the guy that would give him the most trouble, if there is trouble to be had. But then obviously Justin Gaethje beat Tony. And the guy that showed up there in May, I was like, wow, I just watched it, right? I was there. I was like, I just watched the most dangerous guy for Khabib. With his wrestling ability and his striking ability, I believe that he's dangerous. But there's even something that stands out to me even more. It's the confidence. I mean, this dude believes that he's going to win. Like, there's no doubt in his mind. So I think Justin's mentality is what gives him a big chance.
So that's what gives Justin a chance. But with Khabib, we know it's his wrestling, right? It's incredible. I mean, obviously the wrestling expert that you are, I mean, what is it about him, right? I mean, wrestling, tons of guys wrestle, right? I mean, it's a martial arts that's been around forever. What is it about him that makes him so damn good at it?
Well, his ability to continue to chase down takedowns, right? That's what it is. You know, like, he said something yesterday about me taking Stipe down once and then stopping because he got up. Well, he won't stop. He really will not stop. He'll continue to try to take you down until eventually you kind of go, okay, I'm going to accept being on my back. And when you accept being on your back, it's no good with him because he's so good at top control.
Okay. Then I want to ask you about outside the cage. I mean, you know what it's like to be in the spotlight, right? And have all the pressure on. Obviously, he's a global superstar, but I feel like here in particular, like the spotlight is super bright, man. Can you talk about? I mean, do you think this is a more difficult place for him to fight because of the expectations of his time, of all the attention he's receiving in the lead up to the fight?
You know, when you think about Khabib in the Middle East, you understand that he's globally known, but here it's like at a different level. Now, I would imagine last time he was here, it was much harder to deal with than this time, because he's got about 10 guys with him, right? And those are the guys that stay in his circle, and they are available to him. Outside of media, nobody's in his face anymore. Could you imagine being here last year when he fought Dustin, and the fans and him trying to go get some food, not being in a secure bubble? I think this is probably the ideal situation for Khabib. But yeah, he's massive here. I mean, I think there are a number of reasons why, but he's a big deal.
Nice. Last thing for me, as his teammate and as just a fight fan, man, he wins this fight 29-0. He's talked about 30-0. Book his fight, man. What's the right fight for 30-0? Like, what's the best next matchup for him? Should you win this in spectacular fashion?
You know, the reality is, like, the task at hand this Saturday is so great because Justin's so good. But if Khabib is able to get past him and he's 29-0 looking at his retirement fight, I think it has to be St. Pierre, right? Like, that's the fight, right? Who doesn't think that? I mean, could you imagine the energy of a Khabib versus George St. Pierre fight? With fans? With fans. I mean, this would be the unbelievable athlete from the generation prior versus the unstoppable athlete from this prior. I don't know, Jim Ross said the immovable object versus the whatever, unstoppable force. It would be that, right? It would be just like that. It'd be tremendous. But I think GSP. But I don't know, maybe a catchweight fight, because Khabib cuts a lot to get to 55, right? So if there's ever a fight that warrants a 165-ish area, that's GSP and Khabib.
Daniel, you mentioned Gaethje's confidence coming into this fight, and it does seem like he's very confident, but do you think it's inevitable? Do they all break? Does Justin break?
See, I think that's why Justin's so dangerous, because he hasn't shown that he can break. He seems to thrive in that chaos, right? When it gets uglier and dirtier and more grimy, Justin's smiling. Right, he's cut up, he's gotten dropped multiple times. Dude's smiling. So I believe that he believes that that won't happen to him. And we haven't seen it, so there's no reason for us not to believe what he's saying.
When you say Khabib will just continue to chase the takedown and just transition, is that just a him thing, or is that a difference in the way he's been taught wrestling and Americans get taught wrestling?
You see, that's he's always been a good takedown guy. But before, he was just a takedown guy. Now his striking has gotten so much better. And I believe that that's not only a Khabib thing, that's also an AKA thing. You know, remember Cain Velasquez? He chased 30 takedowns versus Junior Dos Santos or something. You know, these guys will chase takedowns on a ton of occasions, you know. I've had to get multiple takedowns in fights too, right, where I just wrestled. And I think that we developed that in the gym. We have a drill where we're wrestling different guys every minute for 15 minutes, and they're trying to take you down, or you're trying to take them down. It's like we build these drills to try to have that ability to do that inside the fight. And I think Khabib just has taken it to the next level, right? We've seen it. I always say this about our gym in particular. Bob Cook and those guys got to the UFC. Then Mike Swick, John Fitch, Josh Koscheck got the title fights. So they blew the ceiling off of what Bob and them had done. And then me, Kane, and Luke, we became champions, right? We didn't just get to the title fights. And we blew the ceiling again. And now you got to have another guy that's going to come through and do something even greater. And that's what Khabib has done. Not only in his global appeal, but also in the way that he fights in that same type of style. But he takes it to another. He just took it to another level. None of us got 22 takedowns in a fight. He got 22 takedowns. Like, I mean, if I got 5, I was like, oh boy, I had to wrestle a lot tonight. You know, if I had to take somebody down 5 times, I'm like, that was a lot of wrestling. Kane attempted 30 takedowns, but he didn't get 20 of them, right? So like, it's one of the things that our gym really is known for.
I wanted to ask you about another guy who's been at your gym, is Tai Tuivasa.
Yeah, it's my boy right there.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the banter like between you two? I can sort of imagine you guys playing off each other.
He's so funny. Tai Tuivasa is funny. You know what's crazy about Tai? Tyson and AKA training with us, and I mean, we're taking him down like you wouldn't believe it. He was like, man, I knew I came here for a reason, but I didn't expect it was going to be like this. I was like, bro, every time you get up, we're on your legs. Like, we're just on his legs, constantly trying to exhaust him to help him with that and help him not accept being on his back. That's the one thing that kills Ty. In the last fight against the kid, was it Spivak or something like that? And the guy would take him down and Ty would accept guard. Why? Get up. Just get up. Let's see if he is able to do that, to do what Kane used to do or Khabib does, where he has to take it down over and over again, not one round. One round's easy. So we kept taking him down, and he started to learn, and he started to get better, but then the pandemic hit. And guess what? I was with him when the pandemic hit. We were at my house on Ty's birthday, sparring in my garage before it was all complete and ready. We were just beating each other up in there. The news comes on. My wife goes, Daniel, they're about to shut down the state. So I run in the house, get in the shower. I'm like, Ty, we got to go. So Ty's like, oh, he's like, why, mate? Why? I go, bro, we got to go to the store and get food. He's like, why? I go, they're shutting down the state. So I'm like panicking, right? I dart out of the house. I get Ty into my truck, or Ty gets in his car. I'm in my truck. He's staying. I go, what? He goes, what are we supposed to do, mate? I go, get food. He goes, I'm staying in someone's house, mate, because he was renting a room on Airbnb, right? I was like, you got to get as much food as you possibly can. So we get in the Safeway. Everything's like almost off the shelves. No toilet paper, no water. Why toilet paper? Like, he was like, why toilet paper? I was like, I don't know, but just take paper towels. Like, get something, right? Get tissues. So I'm like, and get a lot of meat, because you're a big guy, right? Like, get a lot of meat. He goes, there's no meat. All the chicken's gone. Ty comes to the front of the checkout counter. I said, get whatever you want. I'll buy it. He comes to the checkout counter. Ty has like 6 massive things of corned beef. I was like, who eats this much corned beef? He had like freaking 6-pound corned beef. I was like, yo, you're going to eat all that corned beef. It's going to make you sick. I go, you got to just get meat. He's like, I like corned beef. I was like, but you don't like it that much. Like, this is corned beef for a week. And yeah, but we were like standing in there. They had 20 people in each line. He was like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And then eventually, he left because of his son, right? He was like, DC, they're going to close Australia. He said, I got to go back. I was like, okay. I was like, I never said you have to stay. I was just trying to prepare you if you did. You know, like, if you did have to stay, you needed things and much more than corned beef. He's like, where's the rice? I was like, bro, no more rice in the store. Like, it was crazy. My local Safeway was, like, empty. Yeah, I was with Tai Tuivasa.
He's, like, lost a couple, right? He's coming in, the pressure's on. He admitted to us yesterday, the other day, that it was an eye-opener coming to AKA, probably because of the takedowns. Is he a talent? Is he a talent heavyweight? Have people forgotten? Are they underappreciated? Ty's very talented, right? But here's the thing, and it's just something he admitted to me himself. He didn't know. He said, I was kind of just freestyling this thing. So to go 3-0 in the UFC without really knowing how to fight, how to grapple, that's insane that he was able to do that. That speaks to his talent, right? Speaks to his courage. But you need more than that. You need actual skill. And I think that he's been able to kind of develop that. Last thing for me, you know how when you speak to Khabib, you take on a broken Russian accent?
Yes.
To Ty, do you take on like a weird Australian accent?
I mean, Ty is so out there, man. Have you hung out with Ty at all? He's the best. He's the best, bro. Like, you don't need to pick up anything. You can barely, I talk to him normal. He's the best. I like Ty, though. He's funny, man. He's funny. He's a funny guy.
The Olympics has already obviously been postponed this summer. Justin's been very much like, I'm representing the United States over here. Do you view this as like the next best thing right now, considering we don't really have sports between countries for the foreseeable future?
I think that Justin is, again, you find motivation in different things, right? He finds his motivation in representing our country because Khabib is Russian, right? He is Russian, right? So he's like, it feels like Rocky IV. And I love that dynamic. I love that he is making that a part of the story, because that makes a lot of the American fans go, you know what? But I got to tell you one thing about that. That does not matter as much as you would expect. I was at, I don't know where Anderson fought Chris Weidman the first time, but I was there, right? I was there, filled to the brims with the American pride, red, white, and blue, USA with flags on the set where I'm not supposed to. And Chris Weidman came out, and they booed him in Las Vegas. And Anderson Silva came out, and they cheered him like he was the American guy. That does not matter that much in our sport. It doesn't. So if it's for Justin, it's great. But Anderson got cheered, Chris got booed in Las Vegas. It may as well have been Rio de Janeiro. Sorry.
Michael Chandler was actually going off that. Michael Chandler did a media day too, and he said when there were rumors of him possibly fighting Islam, his DM just blew up with Pakistani fans. So what is it about those fans that they get so intense when it comes to their fighters?
Well, I mean, it's Dagestan. I mean, you been there?
Yeah.
I have. They're not doing all that much over there, you know. They're learning to fight and wrestle. You know, I wrestled there. The dudes can all wrestle. You know, there's like, you know, they're not hanging out like going to the movies. Like they're wrestling and they're fighting, right? They're with their family. So yeah, it's Dagestan. I love it. I love it. Now let's not take it like I hate Dagestan, but there's not much to do. So when a guy like Islam, who's so well known, gets an opportunity to fight on the same card as Khabib and Umar, right? Because Umar was supposed to fight too. They're like, wow, this is like this is like Chicago when the Bulls were the best. Or this would be LA right now, you know, like going crazy because the Lakers won. But yeah, it's Dagestan, and they're very loyal to their guys.
And one final one, a lot of the narrative has been like Dagestan versus U.S. wrestling, but what do you make of the striking between the two? Because Chiesa said Khabib's incredibly underrated. Khabib's joking about he has a good jab.
He does have a good jab. You saw him control Al Iaquinta with a jab, right? He controlled Al. When he couldn't take Al down as easy as he wanted to, he just controlled him with a jab. He has a really good jab. But if you talk about stand-up strike, Justin Gaethje is the better striker. Overall, he's the better striker. Do I feel Khabib can hold his own there? Yes. But Gaethje is the better overall striker. Much more comfortable there, much more confident, and hits harder. You know, so, yeah, Khabib does have the ability to stand up. People do underrated striking. There was a video came out a few weeks ago from him fighting Kamal Shalarus, and he was just taking all these bad shots and kind of dumped. Those days are way in the past. He's a much more competent striker today than he was back then.
You taught him his jab.
I taught him the jab. That's my jab. I was like, because we used to just stand there trying to punch each other in the face with a jab. Oh, there's a jab, DC. I'm like, yeah, you got me with that one. But we just keep throwing the jab. Javier actually showed me too. Javier did. Yeah.
You see over here, I actually want to look ahead a bit to next week. We have Anderson Silva in his last fight. I mean, you're a guy who's fought him. I mean, can you just talk about at the end of his career, what's it like for you to say that you got to add one of the GOATs, you know, to your resume?
Man, when I saw that, I got to admit, like, I kind of had like it was a bit like I was kind of taken back. Like, it's finally going to be done for Anderson. You know, it kind of sucked, right? Like, everybody hoped that he would be done prior. But now that you watch him fight, and you know, like, I still get that thing, right? When his song comes on, and I hope he comes out to his song instead of his son's song like last time. It's just too different, right? Like, keep the DMX song. It is, like, who you are, and you still get that excitement because it's Anderson. So kind of sucks that he's going to be done, but all of our time comes, right? You can only hold on for so long, and Anderson realizes that, so it's over. But yeah, it was phenomenal to compete against him and get a victory. It's nerve-wracking, though. It really is. Doesn't matter how long he's had to train. You look across the octagon, and there's Anderson Silva, and you are taken back to Philadelphia when he fought Stephan Bonner or Forrest Griffin, and it was my first UFC ever. And I'm in the stands, and I see Anderson hit the curtain, and people go crazy. And on the camera is Roy Jones, because he wants to fight him when Roy Jones is everything that every young black man thought of as boxing. So you knew that this guy was next level star, right? You're taken back to that the moment you stand across the octagon with him, especially for me.
Yeah, you've been a part of Khabib's career. You've obviously, been tied to Jon Jones. You have Anderson Silva. Where do you put him on that list of, these top guys?
Man, listen, I think Anderson is one of the greatest fighters of all time. But I do stand firm in what I say. You cannot have bad tests. You can't have bad tests and be considered the best of all time. It's just the way it is. You can't have bad tests. Does not matter what it is. It does not matter what the excuse or reason. You can't have bad tests because so many of us don't, right? If everybody was having bad tests, okay, I get it. But there are a lot of guys that have reached the highest level of the sport without having bad tests. So he will always stand amongst the greatest. But it's really hard to give anyone that distinction if they have bad tests.
Michael Chiesa was here before. You spoke a little bit about his face-off with Khabib Chimaev, and you actually wrestled him. How did it all happen? You guys were in the same restaurant?
So I have this thing, right? When I see a Russian guy, I wrestle him. So that's pretty much all it is. Like, oh, you're Russian, you know how to wrestle, right? They do every time they wrestle me. So I grab them by the arm, they start to defend, and I start to defend, and we end up wrestling. So that's what Lene asked me yesterday. She goes, I saw Khabib for the first time a couple days ago. I gave him a hug, and I miss you. And he's like, I miss you. And then immediately into the wrestling. Because that's what we do. She's like, do you guys just wrestle when you see each other? I said, every time. We could be, if I was to be walking in the middle of Times Square, and I see a guy with a bit of a square head like Khabib and him, you know, they all have that square head. I'm like, oh, this dude's a wrestler. And I'll go grab him, and we'll probably start wrestling in the middle of Times Square. It's just the way it is.
And also, the last time you were here, we spoke about Khamzat's teammate, Guram, and you said you promised you're going to learn his last name if he's going to win.
Yep.
So were you impressed with his performance?
I was, and I knew his last name on Saturday because I said it so much, but now I can't say it anymore. But, yeah, I thought he did good. I thought he was hard on himself. But I was also very impressed with his opponent. Gamrot. Yeah. Guram started the fight so impressively. But then Gamrot actually worked his way back into that fight. That's why Guram was so disappointed. Because into the second round, in the third round, I felt like it was Gamrot's fight, right? So, and when you're a fighter and you're in there, and those last 15 minutes, those last 10 minutes pass, and you're getting taken down over and over again, you start to feel that too. I thought he did good, though. For a guy taking a fight on short notice, fighting an undefeated fighter, I thought he did well.
There was also a funny moment when you bumped into the camera. Maybe it wasn't bad.
Yeah, it was bad.
That moment.
That was me. Maybe when Gamrot fought at that point and Guram fought, I was still concussed from the camera. It was like turn face. That happened 3 times. But it was my fault, actually. I was mad at the cameraman initially, but it was actually my fault. I guess I'm supposed to interview from the opposite side and then go behind the fighter. And then I look and I saw Rogan, and he always does. Rogan immediately turns and goes behind the fighter. So I was like, wow, it's my fault. I was like, you got to stop standing so close to me. And he's like, dude, you're supposed to. I was like, oh, all right. My bad.
Any other questions? Just because you mentioned his name, Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
Excited you watching? How do you see it going?
I mean, who's not watching? Like, who's not watching Roy Jones and Mike Tyson? This is going to be one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year. I can't wait. It's going to be – I'm going to try to go there. If they let people in the arena, I'm there. If they let people in the arena, I'm there. I don't care what my role is. I want to be a part of that pay-per-view.
And to be clear, if somebody sees you on the street, it's okay to try to take you down, but not to say, I bet I could take you down.
Don't say you can. Don't bet me, but try. If you bet me now, we got a lifetime rivalry. Bet me. I bet I could take you down. Don't do that. Hey, listen. Also, listen. Let me just say this. I'm a much different man today than I was in 2010, right? I had just finished wrestling. I get taken down all the time now. You got to remember, back before I fought Jones, I didn't give up a takedown through like 15 fights. But now, I mean, I've probably given up 5 in my career, but that's a lot, right? But, yeah, I've given up some takedowns. Back then, I felt like it was impossible for any fighter to take me down until Alexander Gustafsson did it twice, and I was like, whoa, what is going on here? Right? So, yeah, you can say that, whatever you want. I'm an old man now. I'm retired. Say whatever you want. I ain't fighting.
I think that's it.
All right? Thank you, guys.
DC, I had you a couple questions I could.
Jesus.
Sorry.
You guys, I'm telling you. Just let me go play my video game, man. At this point, guys, working for me 2 hours is too long.
All right, guys.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it all of it.
Hey guys, I've had the impossible task of floor behind me, so take it easy on me. Oh my god. They're
Top back to follow.
They're ready, Hal. I got them all warmed up. They're warmed up to me. Yeah, they're good. Hal, go ahead. Good luck, Hal.
I'm going to keep this on so you guys don't recognize me there. No.
Schmo, go ahead. No. I don't know him. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, John.
It's all good.
It's all you. No, I'm just joking.
Talking about,
I know him.
Fair enough.
I met him yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought we went bad at this.
Okay, I mean, he's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
Yeah.
Justin Gaethje, how long has he been a guy that's been on your personal radar, somebody that you were scouting and keeping an eye on and trying to start breaking them down?
I actually haven't had Justin on my radar, and a question was posed to me 2019, a question was posed, what do I think about him? And at that particular time, I didn't really think much of him because I wasn't paying attention to him. So I said, I don't, and maybe that got you know how you guys twist that thing a little bit. Ariel's real good at that. But anyway, so long story short, I didn't really pay attention to him till he dismantled Tony, because now he was real. Now he's in front of us. So then I paid attention and I saw how great he actually is, and what a challenge he is. That's when I really paid attention.
So when it comes to Khabib, I mean, I think the question is like, what's the biggest challenge in terms of Khabib, right? Is it the fact that Justin's wrestling is so strong, his defensive wrestling is there, or is it, the power that he brings with his hands, his low kicks, that sort of thing? Is it the wrestling or the striking that makes him more dangerous?
It's the striking for me, and the fact that he has D1 wrestling does also have a big impact, but it's the striking. He's the best kicker in the business, I believe, in the 155 anyways, because I think Israel probably takes the nod for being the best kicker all the way around, but I think in the 155 I give it to Justin. He's the best kicker all the way around over everybody, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Khabib doesn't really want to talk about it, and understandably so, but his camp has changed with the loss of his father. Behind the scenes better than we do. How much does it really affect his preparation, whether it be the physical aspect of it, the mental aspect, of course? I mean, how much different has it really been behind the scenes?
It does affect, and I'll tell you how it affects. When I had his father with me, even though I've only cornered one time, and that was with Dustin, the fact that I would talk to Khabib about things, about how we apply things, and he'd always tell me, yes, my father say same thing, coach. I don't have that anymore, so I don't have that backup before, someone that grew with him and knew him better than anybody. I don't have that, so for me, it's a little bit more difficult per se, but he's been handling it fantastic. He's driven, he's motivated to preserve the legacy that him and his father had planned, and that's the one thing I can say that is great. His mind, it's like, he says, coach, if anything breaks, it's okay because my mind is not broken.
And lastly, if he wins this fight, obviously he talked about going 30-0 and what a mark that would be. Is there a matchup that you would like to see for him in that 30th fight? Is there a fight that you would like to prepare with him to if it is his last fight, to send him out on a high note?
Well, if we get by Justin, which I'm hoping we do, and that's the plan, I would like GSP, because I was in the car when him and his father discussed the ideal last opponent was GSP. Now, whether it's Khabib's last fight, I don't know, but let's just say it is, like you're saying. I would say GSP would be my number one pick. Number one pick, GSP.
You mentioned that you weren't really watching Gaethje until the performance over Ferguson. When you've been preparing for Tony Ferguson for so long, so when you see a guy come in and do that to him, does that just make you immediately think this guy's the biggest threat we could possibly ever face?
I thought when I looked at him, I was thinking that probably the second biggest threat, because I still to this day believe Conor was. And the reason why I believe Conor was is because that precision striking. But Justin could easily prove me wrong and prove to be the toughest test we've ever had. We've yet to see that. But I know we've already seen Conor, and that's why I always say Conor, because if you think about it, who's won a round against Khabib? Conor. And who's given Khabib a tough time take the first round? He took Conor down. But how much damage did Khabib give him? No, Conor was very, very good there. So to me, I have to give it to Conor for that. I haven't seen Justin. Now, obviously, if I've seen Justin already and we fought him already and we are victorious like I'm hoping, then I can tell you 100% he was the toughest. But right now, I think in theory, he's number two.
At the press conference yesterday, Gaethje said, I have to stay off the cage or I'll die. And I think everyone understands that Khabib's tactic is going to be to get him to the cage. But does that almost give you a tell that if Khabib gets him against the cage with regularity, he's going to mentally break? Is he giving you a tell there that, if I'm in that position that I can't be in, I'm going to give up?
Absolutely not. That guy ain't quitting for nothing. That guy's a true warrior, man. He ain't quitting. You got to kill him to stop that guy, both of those guys. So, no, it goes in the middle. It goes in the cage. He's fighting. He's giving it all. You've seen what type of person he is. You've seen what kind of great warrior he is, and you see the mentality he has. How can you not love him? You have to respect him. If you don't love him, you have to respect him. And obviously, my job is I'm with Khabib's coach, and I love him, and I want him to win, and we're doing everything we can. But Justin is as credible as they come in every department, mental, physical, and how he approaches the fight game, how he acts. He's great everywhere.
Over the past few fights, Gaethje's striking has become a lot more refined. He used to be this crazy brawler. Khabib's a little bit of an unorthodox striker, but I don't necessarily think he's a bad striker, like some people like to suggest. But do you think there's an argument that by becoming more refined and traditional, Gaethje's actually playing into Khabib's hands, and would it be better for Gaethje to just come in, swing wildly and unorthodox himself?
No, I wish Gaethje would come in wild and orthodox and go crazy. That would be better. But his coach, settled him down, got him to relax and think about the game planning and fight correctly. And therefore, he's got a great coach. So obviously, he knows what's up. So I got a master chess player on the other end of the octagon from me. So I have to stay sharp, too, because I'm not dealing with a normal coach. He's an incredible coach.
Last one from me. You mentioned Conor and the threat he possesses, and that you think Justin's probably still number 2. I'm just curious how you would imagine a fight between those two would go.
Rematch between?
No, between Conor and Gaethje.
Oh, I think Conor. The precision striking. And the reason why I say Conor is because Gaethje's not going to engage his wrestling. He's going to do what he always does, going to stand. And if you're doing that with Conor, I'm sorry. Unless you knock him out, you're not going to beat him. I don't think so. That's just my opinion.
Javier, when you were watching the Tony Ferguson fight, there were obviously no fans, so you can hear both coaches pretty well. But what did you make of Trevor Wittman's coaching between rounds? A lot of people praised him for calming Justin down.
Fantastic. Compared to the other corner, I don't think they knew what the heck that was going on. I think they weren't used to what happened, and they didn't know how to bring their fighter back. So it's like a great corner versus a corner that actually just they were lost. I thought.
A lot's obviously been made of the wrestling versus the wrestling, but in terms of the striking, I think a lot of people would say Justin has the advantage. But do you think Khabib's striking is just that much? Is just so underrated coming into this fight?
Well, Khabib's striking has been underrated from the get-go. I mean, watch what he did with Conor. He stood with Conor the whole round on purpose. And did he win that round? Probably not. Did he lose that round? Maybe not. Maybe he won. I mean, it was that close. So he does that to me all the time. And the thing I don't feel comfortable about is because I like an easy route, and to me, I think he's the best on the planet that there's ever been at 155 on taking people to the ground and sticking on the ground. So I prefer the easy routes. I always like that. So he always scares the hell out of me when he likes to stand with people. I don't like that, and I'm saying this because I'm hoping that it rings true to him to don't stand with this guy. I don't want that because it's not an easy feeling knowing that you have an easier route to a victory and he chooses to go the harder route. And with his father there, he went strictly 100% the father's plan route, and that's the part that scares me a little.
Yeah, I just want to ask, what do you think's been the secret to the longevity of American Kickboxing Academy from the Mike Swift days and the trio at welterweight to now you got Khabib, the next generation? I mean, not many teams can say they've had that long success of churning out these high-level guys just through the years.
It's just the love, I mean, it all really started with me with Frank Shamrock when Frank Shamrock was my first middleweight UFC champion, and he was the first well-rounded fighter. If you guys remember that, some of you might, some of you don't. I think John remembers, but it all started with him. And it's just the love and luck, and I've had the fortune of having Dwayne Zinkin and Crazy Bob Cook. They helped me with the management of bringing all these top quality wrestlers to come in and train to do MMA. So that's really helped a lot immensely because that's where I got DC and Cain Velasquez.
I mean, who's coming up next? I mean, Khabib is saying he might be done at 30-0, so you're going to need the next generation. I mean, who's coming up right now?
Well, Khabib has a lot on his side. He's got Islam Makhachev, who's fighting the main event against RDA. Watch out for that one. Expect Islam to be victorious. Umar, his cousin, another undefeated guy. His other cousin, Usman, who signed with Bellator. I think he's going to be a superstar. It's just with time, but expect Usman to be the Luke Rockhold of Dagestan, in my opinion. I mean, the kid's got it all.
On the YouTube channel, I Am Bay, Khabib was taunting, DC was taunting Khabib about wrestling Burroughs. Now, Gaethje gave Burroughs arguably a better run for his money than Askren did. So what does that say to you about Gaethje?
Oh, it's just same as he can wrestle. But it's MMA wrestling. I mean, I put Burroughs in there with Khabib and make it MMA. Guess what? Burroughs is going to have a tough time, and he's going to get taken down because he's not used to getting punched. He's not used to getting kicked. See, I've been in this game long enough to know there's a difference between just pure wrestling and pure MMA wrestling. There's a whole big difference. I experienced that myself when I put on the gloves with Frank Shamrock, and it was just a kickboxing match. I mean, I schooled him so bad it was ridiculous, but then all of a sudden takedowns were into the play, and guess who got schooled? Me. I was running like a chicken, trying to avoid from him taking me down. It was crazy. I couldn't stand. I couldn't do anything. So I learned right early on that there's different games right there. That we're talking wrestling, pure wrestling, and we're talking MMA wrestling. Burroughs doesn't know how to strike, so you can wrestle with him all you want. That's good. That's one element, but it's not MMA. Yes.
Since you started working with Khabib, what would you say are the biggest involvements, whether as a fighter or as a man?
His maturity, his leadership, how he's taken over the responsibilities of his father and how he's doing great things by opening up, free gyms around the world for the underprivileged to come and train. And that was his father's vision. That was his father's goal, to unite all countries and around the world with physical fitness, and he's done that in Dagestan, and Khabib's going to carry that on just like his father did. Schmo, what's the matter?
All right, I got one for you.
Come on. But no, don't talk normal. Don't be normal on me.
Oh, no, I'm doing normal. Obviously, Khabib's popularity speaks for itself. Go back to last year, UFC 242. The world was in a much different place. We're, a day before weigh-ins and everything like that. Do you think that this has been easier to prepare for in these final training sessions with Khabib, with the mental focus, with the less distractions than it was last year?
No, I think this one's harder. This one's harder. This is harder. He's on track, but this is harder. I can see it. And one element, and we all know it, his father. It's been harder. No lie, it's been harder. He's on track, but this has been more of a lonelier time for him by himself. I could see it, and I think that's what's also actually going to help us too, is the fact that he's doing this for his father and himself, obviously, because you can't just do it for one person. It's got to be yourself. But this is a harder one.
Oh.
I don't like normal. Are we good?
Good.
Okay, thanks, guys.